The Zephyrian Trade Consortium had built its reputation on three fundamental principles: efficiency, civility, and what they graciously termed proportional negotiation. These weren't mere corporate buzzwords painted on the walls of their sprawling station orbiting the gas giant Nethys Prime. Oh no. They were a philosophy, a way of life, a testament to how truly evolved beings conducted business across the galaxy's most prosperous trade routes. Of course, proportional meant different things to different species, but the Zephyrians had helpfully standardized the definition. When a Korthani merchant complained about docking fees, a few broken tentacles usually clarified the reasonableness of their rates. When Vaxian traders questioned cargo inspection protocols, a brief stint in the station's atmospheric recycling chambers typically resolved any lingering doubts about regulatory compliance. The beauty of the system lay in its elegant simplicity. Everyone left understanding exactly where they stood in the galactic pecking order, which is why Captain Vera Knox's arrival should have been unremarkable. Her ship, the Meridian's Edge, was a modest human cargo hauler, nothing fancy, just honest ceramasteel plating and reliable fusion drives that had seen better decades. The kind of vessel that screamed small-time operator in 17 different trade languages. Perfect for the consortium's preferred customer demographic, those too insignificant to cause real trouble, yet profitable enough to squeeze systematically. Trade Administrator Kelvox Threep reviewed the incoming vessel's manifest with the satisfied air of a predator examining particularly docile prey. Humans were delightfully predictable, emotional, impulsive, and blessed with the attention spans of particularly dim Altarian gnats. They'd bluster and complain about fees, certainly, but ultimately they'd pay. They always paid. The alternative was exclusion from one of the galaxy's most lucrative trade networks, and humans, for all their faults, understood basic economics. Docking Bay 17. Threep instructed his subordinate, selecting a berth conveniently located next to the station's waste processing facility. A small motivational reminder about appropriate gratitude. Standard inspection protocol, elevated security screening, and, he paused, reviewing the human's previous visits to consortium space. Remind Captain Knox about the recent updates to our liability policies. The updates were particularly elegant. Any disputes regarding trade practices, docking fees, or regulatory compliance would be resolved through the consortium's preferred method of arbitration: collateral forfeiture. Nothing too dramatic, perhaps a finger for minor infractions, a hand for more serious violations, limbs for genuine transgressions. Perfectly reasonable when one considered the alternative of lengthy legal proceedings that might interfere with commerce. Captain Knox docked with the precise efficiency expected from her species. Humans might lack sophistication, but they could follow basic navigational protocols. Threep made his way to the docking bay with the unhurried confidence of someone about to conduct a thoroughly predictable transaction. The human was smaller than he'd anticipated, which was often the case with their kind. Where Zephyrians achieved their natural 7-foot height through proper evolutionary development, humans remained stubbornly compact, as if refusing to acknowledge the universe's preference for imposing physical presence. She had dark hair pulled back in what appeared to be a practical style, and the kind of clothing that suggested someone who actually worked for a living rather than merely supervising others who did. Captain Knox, Threep began, his translator converting his melodious Zephyrian into the harsh consonants of human speech. Welcome to Nethys Prime Trade Station. I trust your journey was adequate. Knox regarded him with the sort of expression humans wore when calculating whether violence was worth the paperwork. Administrator Threep, I presume. I'm here to negotiate docking fees and cargo inspection schedules for my quarterly runs through this sector. Negotiate. Threep savored the word. How charmingly optimistic. I'm afraid our fees are quite standard, Captain. Non-negotiable, one might say. Current rates are 47,000 credits for extended docking privileges, plus inspection fees, regulatory compliance charges, and the recently implemented security assessments. Even by human standards, the reaction was satisfyingly predictable. Knox's jaw tightened, a delightful species-wide tell that indicated imminent emotional outburst. 47,000? That's triple the rates from my last visit 6 months ago. Market forces, Threep explained with practiced sympathy. Surely someone engaged in interstellar commerce understands the fluid nature of economic conditions. Of course, if the fees present difficulties, we do offer alternative arrangements through our arbitration services. Knox's eyes narrowed. Humans possessed remarkably expressive faces, another evolutionary quirk that made them so transparent in business dealings. What kind of alternative arrangements? Threep gestured toward the documents displayed on his portable interface, legal language rendered in 17 different scripts, most of which humans couldn't read anyway. Collateral agreements, temporary forfeiture of assets, pending resolution of payment disputes, nothing permanent, naturally. We're quite civilized here. Assets meaning? Whatever seems proportional to the disagreement, Threep replied, allowing just enough ambiguity to maintain the illusion of choice. For someone questioning standard docking fees, perhaps, a hand? Easily replaced with modern medical technology, and it demonstrates good faith while we resolve the financial irregularities. The silence stretched long enough for Threep to wonder if the translation had malfunctioned. Humans were usually quicker to rage or resignation, not this peculiar stillness that seemed to settle over the captain like some predatory calm. Finally, Knox nodded slowly. A hand, for questioning fees that tripled without notice. Proportional response, Captain. Surely you appreciate the elegance of the system. Much more efficient than lengthy arbitration proceedings that would keep your cargo tied up for months. Knox extended her right hand not in greeting, but palm down on Threep's portable scanner. Standard amputation protocols, I assume? Clean cut, sealed wound, proper documentation. Threep blinked all four of his primary eyes in surprise. Most species required considerably more persuasion before accepting the inevitable. Quite standard, yes. Our medical facilities are among the finest in this sector. You'll be cleared for departure within the hour. The Zephyrian medical technician performed the procedure with clinical efficiency that had been refined through hundreds of similar arbitrations. A localized neural dampener, precise laser amputation at the wrist, immediate cauterization, and biological sealant application. Captain Knox watched the entire process with the sort of detached interest usually reserved for routine maintenance procedures. Excellent, Threep declared as the medical team finished their work. Knox's severed hand was properly catalogued and stored according to consortium regulations. Collateral needed to be preserved, pending final resolution of disputes. After all, your docking fees are temporarily waived pending collection of the arbitrated settlement. You're cleared for departure at your convenience, Captain. Knox flexed her remaining fingers, testing the mobility of her left hand. Generous of you. I trust this arrangement will be properly documented in galactic trade databases. Naturally, transparency is fundamental to maintaining trust in interstellar commerce. Knox departed with the sort of unhurried efficiency she'd displayed upon arrival. No theatrics, no human emotional outbursts, no threats of revenge or promises to contact their pathetic excuse for a government, just quiet acceptance of how business was conducted in civilized space. Threep felt genuinely pleased with the interaction. Humans were finally learning their place in the galactic economy. Perhaps there was hope for their species after all. 3 weeks later, the Meridian's Edge returned to Nethys Prime, accompanied by 7 other human vessels that hadn't appeared in any previous trade databases. Threep reviewed the approaching ships with growing confusion. The additional vessels displayed none of the civilian markings typical of merchant fleets. Instead, they bore the sort of angular, predatory aesthetics usually associated with military hardware. Incoming transmission from Captain Knox, reported his communications officer. Put her through, Threep instructed, already formulating his standard greeting for returning customers. Knox's image appeared on the main display, and Threep noticed she'd acquired a rather impressive mechanical replacement for her amputated hand. Top-tier military hardware, if his assessment was accurate. The kind of prosthetic that cost significantly more than the docking fees she'd originally disputed. Administrator Threep, Knox began, her voice carrying the same measured tone as their previous encounter. "I'm returning to collect my property. Captain Knox, welcome back. I trust you're prepared to settle the outstanding fees for your previous—" "I'm not here to pay fees," Knox interrupted. "I'm here to collect what's mine. You have something that belongs to me." Threep's confusion mounted. Humans were supposed to be straightforward. Their emotional transparency made them refreshingly predictable compared to more sophisticated species. "Captain, I'm afraid I don't understand. Your arbitration agreement was quite specific. Regarding you have my hand," Knox stated flatly. "I want it back." "Well, yes, technically the appendage remains in our custody pending final resolution of your dispute. But surely you understand that returning collateral requires settling the underlying." The communication display flickered and expanded to show tactical readouts from Knox's escort vessels. 7 ships, each mounting enough firepower to reduce a trade station to component molecules. Suddenly, Threep's understanding of proportional response required significant recalibration. "Captain Knox," he began carefully, "surely you realize that bringing military vessels into consortium space represents a considerable escalation of what was fundamentally a minor commercial disagreement." Knox smiled, the first genuine expression of emotion Threep had witnessed from her species. It was not a reassuring sight. "Administrator Threep, you removed my hand because I questioned your fees. I consider this a perfectly proportional response to theft of human property." "Theft?" Threep's vocal cords produced a sound that his translator couldn't quite render in human speech. "Captain, we followed established arbitration protocols. This is how civilized beings resolve commercial disputes." "Civilized?" Knox repeated the word with the same distaste Threep might reserve for discussing waste recycling. "You mean the way you've been civilizing smaller species for decades? Breaking tentacles, atmospheric torture, systematic dismemberment." She leaned forward, and Threep noticed that her new hand had rather impressive grip strength indicators. "I did some research during my absence, Administrator." Fascinating reading. The tactical displays were updating in real time now, showing Threep's defensive systems being methodically cataloged and analyzed by Knox's escort fleet. His station's defensive capabilities, which had seemed perfectly adequate for dealing with civilian merchants, appeared laughably insufficient against actual military hardware. "Captain Knox, please, let's discuss this rationally. Your hand is perfectly preserved in our medical facilities. We can arrange an immediate return pending reasonable settlement of." "I'm not interested in settlements," Knox replied. "I'm interested in collecting my property and ensuring this misunderstanding doesn't happen to other human traders." The first explosion was almost gentle, a precisely targeted strike that disabled the station's primary communications array without causing significant structural damage. The second removed their defensive weapon systems with the same surgical precision. By the third, Threep realized that Captain Knox's definition of proportional response might require some adjustment to his worldview. "My hand, Administrator. Where is it?" Threep's subordinates were checking their emergency protocols with the sort of panic usually reserved for stellar phenomena or tax audits. The station's defensive systems weren't responding to commands, their communications were limited to short range only, and the human fleet had positioned itself to control all escape routes from Nethys Prime. "Medical Bay 7, Threep admitted, his voice climbing into registers that his species typically reserved for mating calls or territorial disputes. "Preservation Unit 43. The access codes are already in our system," Knox confirmed. "My people are retrieving it now," which raised uncomfortable questions about consortium data security that Threep wasn't prepared to address while under active siege by psychotic human merchants. "Captain Knox, surely you realize that this display will be reported to galactic authorities. Military action over commercial disputes is explicitly prohibited by whom?" Knox asked. "The same galactic authorities who've been happily ignoring your arbitration practices for decades. The ones who classified systematic mutilation as acceptable trade regulation." She paused, apparently receiving some communication through her personal interface. "Ah, excellent. My hand has been retrieved. Threep waited for the inevitable demand credits, trade concessions, formal apologies, something that would allow him to salvage this situation and return to normal operations. Instead, Knox simply stared at him through the display, with the sort of expression humans wore when solving particularly complex mathematical equations. "What do you want?" Threep finally asked. "I want you to understand something, Administrator," Knox replied. "You cut off my hand because I questioned your fees. That seemed perfectly reasonable to you. Proportional response, civilized arbitration. All very proper and legal." She held up her mechanical replacement, flexing fingers that could probably crush Zephyrian bone without effort. "So when I came back with 7 warships to retrieve my property, that should seem equally reasonable. Proportional response, as you put it." The implications were staggering. "Captain Knox, you can't possibly believe that military action is equivalent to standard commercial arbitration." "Why not?" Knox asked with genuine curiosity. "You established the parameters, Administrator. When someone disagrees with your terms, you take pieces of them until they comply. I disagreed with having my hand removed, so I took pieces of your station until you returned it. Perfectly logical by your own standards." Threep's communication officer was gesturing frantically about incoming transmissions from other human vessels. Apparently Knox's personal fleet was merely the beginning of what appeared to be a comprehensive reassessment of human trade policy. Dozens of human ships were requesting immediate arbitration hearings with consortium administrators throughout the sector. "Captain Knox, what exactly do you want from us?" "I want you to understand that humans don't negotiate the way other species do," Knox replied. "When you take something from us, we don't calculate acceptable losses or compromise positions. We don't weigh the cost of resistance against the inconvenience of submission." Her smile returned, carrying implications that made Threep's digestive system consider emergency evacuation procedures. "We simply take it back, all of it, with interest." The human fleet began departing Nethys Prime with the same methodical precision they'd demonstrated during their assault. No demands for reparations, no territorial claims, no formal declarations of war. Just a quiet demonstration of exactly what proportional response meant when calculated by human mathematics. Threep watched the ships disappear into hyperspace and wondered how to explain to consortium leadership that their standard arbitration practices might require some policy adjustments. The galaxy's smaller species had always accepted systematic intimidation as the price of participating in interstellar commerce. None of them had ever considered the possibility of simply refusing to pay it. In the weeks that followed, Threep noticed a curious phenomenon. Species that had previously submitted to consortium arbitration with resigned acceptance began questioning the proportionality of their settlements. A Corthany merchant whose tentacles had been severed for disputing inspection schedules returned with a flotilla of mining vessels and some very pointed questions about medical bay security. Vaxian traders who had endured atmospheric torture for regulatory complaints began arriving with environmental suits and detailed knowledge of life support system vulnerabilities. The consortium's carefully maintained order was experiencing what economists termed market correction, although most economists hadn't anticipated corrections delivered through coordinated military action by previously docile trading partners. Threep received a personal communication from Captain Knox 6 months after their initial encounter. She was calling from the bridge of what appeared to be a significantly upgraded vessel, surrounded by crew members wearing the sort of equipment that suggested human military involvement in civilian commerce had become standard practice. "Administrator Threep," she began, with that same unsettling courtesy she'd displayed during their first meeting. "I wanted to thank you for the educational experience." "Educational? You taught me something important about galactic trade practices," Knox explained. "All those years, human merchants had been accepting unfair terms because we thought that's how business was conducted in civilized space. We assumed that larger, more established species understood proper commercial protocol." She paused, apparently reviewing some data that was scrolling past her display. "Turns out we were thinking about it all wrong." Threep wasn't entirely certain he wanted to hear Knox's revised understanding of proper commercial protocol. We used to think that trade was about mutual benefit, Knox continued. Finding arrangements that worked for everyone, building relationships based on trust and fair dealing. Very naive, really. You showed us that galactic commerce is actually about establishing dominance through systematic violence. Captain Knox, surely you don't believe that commercial arbitration represents— Oh, but it does, Knox interrupted. You remove pieces of people who disagree with you until they submit to your terms. The only mistake we made was thinking there were rules about which pieces could be removed and by whom. Her mechanical hand tapped against what appeared to be a weapons control interface. Thank you for clarifying the actual parameters of galactic trade law. The transmission ended with Knox's ship disappearing into hyperspace, leaving Threep to contemplate the philosophical implications of educational outreach programs conducted through applied violence. The Zephyrian Trade Consortium's quarterly reports now included a new category of operational expenses, cultural sensitivity training, and arbitration protocol adjustment. The galaxy's merchant classes had undergone what diplomatic historians would later term rapid pedagogical evolution regarding acceptable business practices. Species that had spent decades refining techniques for profitable intimidation discovered that their educational methods were surprisingly transferable. The same principles that had made systematic mutilation an effective negotiation tool worked equally well when applied by previously victimized trading partners. Trade Administrator Kelvox Threep eventually adapted to the new commercial environment, though it required significant adjustment to his understanding of proportional response. His current position, Assistant Undersecretary for Compliance Monitoring in the consortium's newly established Department of Reciprocal Relations, offered fewer opportunities for creative arbitration, but provided excellent job security and comprehensive medical coverage. The galaxy's trading networks had achieved a new equilibrium based on the fundamental principle that Captain Knox had so elegantly demonstrated. When someone takes something from you, the civilized response is to take it back, with interest, using whatever methods seem proportional to the original transgression. Kelvox often reflected on Knox's final lesson during their last encounter. She had established, with admirable clarity, that humans didn't negotiate the way other species did. When presented with systematic intimidation as standard business practice, they didn't calculate acceptable losses or seek compromise positions. They simply redefined the parameters of the conversation, and the galaxy, with its characteristic adaptability, had learned to speak their language fluently.